Elias had learned to trust the small noises that meant everything was still alive. The soft hum of the refrigerator at his apartment, the distant thump of a neighbor dropping something, the quiet click of the coffee maker turning off. These were anchors that kept him tethered to a normal day. For years he chased stories that fit neatly into a sheet of paper and a couple of actionable quotes. It paid the rent, tempered his curiosity into something productive. But when curiosity came unmoored, it came back like a tide, inevitable and relentless. The message arrived on a slow Thursday, tucked under 100 promotional emails and a reminder about a library book overdue by 3 months. The subject line was a single phrase, lantern below. The sender was 2 letters he did not know, EK. The body was 2 sentences and a single attachment, an old grainy map with a hand-drawn circle and a note in the margin, Hollow Ridge, not on maps, not gone. Look under the light. It read like a dare. Elias stared at the map until late at night, the halogen lamp throwing a cone of yellow over his desk, the apartment receding into an airless box. Hollow Ridge. The name had a strange sound in his mouth, both specific and mythic. Modern search engines returned nothing. No municipality, no weather reports, no property listings. The coordinates on the map, when pasted into his GPS, spun and then returned a blank field. The digital world had shrugged and erased the place, as if it had always been someone else's secret. He could have ignored it. He could have let it be a curious file in a folder, marked weird, and finished his coffee and gone to bed. But he was a reporter, and reporters feed on the edges of things. He had spent entire careers building a tolerance for the awkward truth and the inconvenient lead. There was a voice in him that liked to answer small mysteries. Hollow Ridge sounded like one that would not go gently into the night. He left the next morning. The highway was a long gray line. He drove deeper past the suburbs through pines that smudged the horizon until the signage thinned and the road became a ribbon of 2 lanes, then less. The sky that day held the exact color of old paper. The air smelled like late autumn rain that had not yet decided whether to fall. At the place the map indicated, the GPS blinked no signal, and the cloud of satellite dots collapsed into a single, blank point. If Hollow Ridge existed, it was not eager to reveal itself. The first person he met was a woman on a porch. She was older, maybe late 60s, and the house looked like something people photograph for weathered postcards. Clapboard, a sagging porch, a wind chime that announced every little motion. Her hair was wrapped in a faded scarf, her hands busy with a mug that steamed despite the chill. Elias rolled his window down and called, "Hello." She watched him with gentle, unblinking attention. "You don't see Hollow Ridge," she said before he had a chance to ask. Her voice had the careful steadiness of someone who'd been asked the same question too often to be surprised by it anymore. "What?" Elias asked. "At least not the way you think you will." She set the mug down. "Most of the day it doesn't show up on maps. Most of the day it's a blank. People forget. People pass the place and drive on. Only some see the ridge when it decides to show itself." She smiled in a way that was both kind and tired. "You looking for the lantern?" "The lantern?" "Down below, the light that's not of this world." She took a slow breath. "You from the city, the way you look. You don't have the long look." Her hand pointed wordlessly toward the east, where the land folded into a hollow that the map had circled. If you go, remember, don't answer the quiet voices. Don't mimic their songs. Be the one who listens and not the one who sings. Elias was not much for omens, but there was a way certain people framed their words and left them in the air like warnings. He thanked her, though it felt like thanking a hand on a loose knot. He left with the image of her silhouette, the mug's steam, the porch light burning faint like a single stubborn star. The road slid down and the trees grew older and closer. A ribbon of fog began to lay across the ground like a first try at a blanket. At the low point, where the map's circle became a faint topographical dip, there was, impossibly, an old metal gate. It sat crooked and rusted, half sunk into the earth. Someone had once carved letters into one of the posts, letters that time had gone eager to eat. He could only make out the word hollow, and beneath it, a set of names, scratched, shallow, and barely legible. The gate yielded under his hand with an alarmed squeal, and the world opened into a hollow, like the inside of a shell. The temperature dropped, the light filtered like an old film, diffused and thin. Houses were arranged around a central glade. They were older than time had any right to allow, tall, narrow, their chimneys like little bones against the light. None of them showed signs of modern life. No satellite dishes, no new paint, no plastic. Yet small things were there. A child's wooden toy half swallowed by moss, a string of laundry frozen in place like a memory, a pail with a glint of stale water. At the center stood a lantern, not lit, but placed upon a post at water level, the glass dulled by dust. The post wasn't in a fountain or well. The ground opened there into a round mouth, something like a capped well. The map had only hinted at a well. The map had failed to speak the rest. Elias called out the woman's name, but the place answered with silence, the kind of silence that has density, that holds the shape of sound as if awaiting it. He felt then the first of the voices, a faint, rustling murmur coming from under the earth. It was not one voice, but a braided chorus, breathing, whispering like the soft rubbing of pages. He could not distinguish words at first. They were the sound of histories being sifted. A small child, perhaps 7 or 8, stepped out of the broken doorway of a house. He wore a wool cap, and his eyes were too bright for the place. He held a tin boat cupped in both hands, like a relic. He looked at Elias with the solemnity of somebody reading an adult's face, to find cracks. "You woke it," the child said, and his voice was a bell that had rung too many times. "What is it?" Elias asked. "The lantern." The child tilted his head. "The water remembers. It asks for voices." Elias knelt. "Who are you?" "Joel." The child turned the tin boat slowly, watching its reflection. "We sing to keep it calm. Sometimes it sinks back. When it sinks back, people sleep for a long time." Elias thought of the woman on the porch, her advice. The quiet voices came, more insistent now, like distant relatives shuffling inside different rooms. A memory of a lullaby snagged in the air and folded itself into the edges of his mind. For a breath, he almost repeated it. Then he swallowed the thought. He kept his mouth shut. Joel went back to the doorway. Elias wondered, taking notes on a small pad, but his handwriting looked like a child's scrawl when he lifted the pen. He wanted to record everything, the angles of sun on slate, the smell of peat in the air, the way the lantern sat like a watchful eye. He wanted to place himself in the center of that hollow, like an anchor. But the voices in the hollow moved differently. They were not time-bound. They went around and around, folding like cloth. In a house whose door hung by a single hinge, he found a ledger stub that had been left open. Someone had listed names in a loose chaos. Births, deaths, things taken, things given. The handwriting grew more erratic as it went on. An entry dated in 1976 read, "We gave the light a tune. It kept our ovens warm. The children stopped crying. The rain turned gentle on the roofs." Then it asked for more. Beneath that, in the same looping hand, one line had been heavily scored through, and then rewritten in a more severe hand. We said, "No." The well answered with a silence that smelled of iron. As the day sunk like a heavy weight into the hollows of the houses, Elias discovered patterns. Stone markers in the ground radiated from the well like ribs. Each stone was etched with a small symbol, a star, a broken circle, a crescent with a line through it. He wondered if they meant to keep something contained or to point toward it. That evening the sky blackened with a low cloud and a hush fell. The lantern remained unlit, stubborn as an old promise. Joel brought a bowl to Elias, a simple thing of cracked porcelain, with a thin broth still warm. Elias accepted. The warmth in his hands was a small, human fact. He asked Joel where the rest of the people were, and Joel smiled a place-worn smile and said, "Some sleep in the houses. Some sleep under the hill. Some sleep down with the water. They don't always wake." When night came, the hollow transformed, as if a different weather had descended. Shadows lengthened and collected in corners. The air seemed to vibrate just beyond audibility. The first time Elias heard the lantern's voice properly, he had already closed his eyes in a sleepy surrender. The sound was like a bell heard through a blanket, and it harmonized with the whisperings that had been skirting the perimeter of mind all day. It said, in the slurred poetry of something older than language, "Come sing. Sing of the ones you have loved. Make the light bright." He did not answer. He listened. A woman appeared at the edge of the clearing wearing a dress that might once have been white, now a gray that the night wore thin. Her face was hollowed, but when she smiled the expression held the genuine ache of someone remembering a hand when no hand was there. She approached Elias and leaned a steadied palm against the lantern's glass. For a moment, the lantern's unlit heart reflected a depth like pond water. The woman closed her eyes. "You shouldn't have come alone," she told him, her voice soft and not unkind. "The lantern wants more than noise. It wants attention. Attention breeds attachment. Attachment keeps it attached." Elias thought about the porch woman's words again. Do not answer the quiet voices. Do not mimic their songs. Listen and do not sing. The phrase arrived like a taut wire snapping. "What does it take?" Elias asked. "It takes pieces," she answered. "It takes time, a kind of forgetting, a share of what you would not otherwise give. Once it takes, the village is quieter but not whole. It hums, and those who remain think that hum is mercy. But the hum is hunger." "How do people live?" Elias asked, because of the child and the bowl, and the bone-deep wear in people's faces. "Do they bargain? Do they choose? Does anyone ever leave? The woman's smile showed no triumph. Once, maybe. Once someone found the old bell and rang it, and the well quieted for a season. They believed they had closed the mouth, but the well is patient. It sleeps, and it waits. The bell does not silence it forever, only for the length of a breath. Elias returned to his car that night, but he did not leave Hollow Ridge. Instead, he slept in a small room above what had once been a bakery. In the dark, he listened for the hollow hum and tried to map the faint edges of the voices. He took a recorder and set it next to the bed, more as ritual than strategy. If there was any hope of coming back from something that wanted to eat what it could not have in the normal run of life, he thought, it would be through hearing it into being and then interrupting it in a precise way. He resolved a plan that felt at once impossible and logical. If the lantern fed on song and memory, then with enough record and countersound he might starve it, or at least thread a stubborn silence through its music. The following day brought another visitor, an old man who walked like a machine running on habit. His name was Mercer, and his family name was on the ledger that Elias had found. Mercer had a ledger of his own, a pad full of notes and a little brass whistle that he never used except during the day. We used to send out watchers, he told Elias. We walked the ridge at dusk. We watched the water. We would whistle if the sound grew like greed. The whistle kept the children near. His fingers were knotted from decades of work. His eyes held the flat stoicism of those who had bargained with small, silent evils for a long time. It's choosing again, Mercer said after a long pause. It always picks a season. We thought we knew its rhythm. We do not. He thumbed through the small pad and found a page marked with a faded star. He tapped the margin. 22 years with breath stolen, and it comes back. It is patient because we tire. We forget to ring the bell. Some of us want to forget. Forgetting is easier than remembering our debt. Elias listened and wrote. He cross-referenced Mercer's notes with the ledger and pieced together a cycle. Periods of pale peace, then a small hunger, then a taking. He discovered names that ended abruptly. Maris, 1969, Jonas, 1971. Under each, notations blurred into gibberish. The dates seemed to cluster every 11 to 14 years, a rhythm like the slow pull of the moon. At dusk, Elias and Mercer stood at the lip of the well. It yawned and watched them like a mouth keeping the weather at bay. Light from the lantern's unlit heart pooled off the stone. Mercer told Elias the story he kept to himself like a talisman. The first of us to hear it thought it was a prayer. The second thought it was an answer. The third, he said no. The well took a child that night, and the rest of us slept with something sharpened in our mouths. Elias could feel an argument spinning inside himself. The journalist who wanted evidence, the man who wanted a scoop, the human who wanted to garden ordinary fear into a story. He asked a blunt question. Has anyone ever tried to destroy it, to fill it in? Mercer's laugh was a dry cough. Do you know how many times I have seen men try to destroy the impossible? They come with shovels and rare courage. They spend a week striking at stone and water, and then the world is full of stories about them. The bell is older than steel. You don't kill a habit so easily. The well is the kind of thing that sits quiet and then returns the favor by being patient. He tapped the brass whistle at his throat like proof. Elias's plan coalesced into something messy but plausible. He would gather sound. He would take every recording and memory he could find, every lullaby and complaint and gossip, the dense patter of living, and he would weave them into a single loop and force the well to answer sharply, loudly. He would ring the bell at the right measure. If the bell had once soothed it, then perhaps other tones might confuse it and make it sleep. He was careful to couch this absurdity in the lens of investigative method. As long as he documented every step, his story could be published. The world could be warned, and the thing might be reduced to a footnote in a long municipal record. He spent the next day going house to house with Mercer and Joel, leaving tape recorders running in corners, coaxing elders into telling their most stubborn memories. He asked them to sing lullabies they had barely remembered. He did not let himself sing. The hollow wanted offerings, and he would make it work for them. He would be the human with the microphone who could reduce a hunger to a form. On the night he chose, the village gathered what it could muster. They set devices in a rough circle around the well, recorders, an old gramophone Elias had wheeled in from his trunk, Mercer's brass whistle tied with a string, a handful of burned-out candles to make a gaunt offering. Joel stood nearby, eyes watchful. The woman in the grey dress sat cross-legged, palms folded. Mercer whispered the cadence that his people had kept like a recipe, a starting tone, a pause, the bell, then the normal breathing of night. Elias started the recordings. He played the archive of lullabies first, the voices shaking, and then settling into the familiar pattern of love. It sounded like falling. Then older voices cracked poetic fragments, then marketplace nonsense, then everyday chatter, layer upon layer. He watched the faces. Each voice fed the hollow like a key on a piano. The well responded with a slow, low reverberation, a chord vibrating that made their teeth ache. He persisted. He mixed the sounds, altered speeds, folded loops within loops. The process was clinical and deranged at once, a long edit of memory. He controlled the levels, created a rhythm that matched the old cadence Mercer had discussed. At a certain point, with the crowd silent and the machine humming like an animal, Elias rang the bell. The sound that exploded from the iron was not a comfort. It was raw. It surrounded them, cut into the air like a clean division. For a moment, nothing else moved. The well's response had the quality of a held breath, of all the years gathering in the throat. Then the earth seemed to exhale. A figure rose, formed of matte shadow and threads of reflection, and it lunged. It moved, not as something separable from the village, but as if it were made of the village's missing pieces. Elias felt a pressure in his head and a taste of iron in his mouth. The machine looped. The bell hammered the space. Then he heard Joel's voice cry out, and a child run. The figure, the echo, paused, as if caught in a moment of recognition. It mimicked a lullaby with stilted precision. For a heartbeat, Elias thought the plan had worked. Then the echo's voice broke into a chorus of memories that belonged to people he loved and strangers he had never met, and everything he had recorded spun back on him as a mirror. It was one thing to play a voice. It was another to force that voice into an audience that included his own name. Somewhere inside the mix, a sample of Elias's own recorded childhood. A brittle warmed cassette he'd found in an old box had been included inadvertently. The echo went still, and then with a fatal tenderness reached for what was familiar. It touched the part of him that remembered the night he had been 7 and felt forgotten. Elias felt something slide away as if a thin ribbon of himself had been pulled into the dark. His hand went to his chest and found a small, astonishing emptiness, like a tooth gone loose. He realized then that curiosity could be an act of violence. He understood what the porch woman and Mercer and the ledger had been circling around like wary animals. By naming the thing and studying it, he had given it vocabulary. By bringing in recorders and machines and his own past, he had offered it new terrain. The well used human attention as a map, and the map told it how to move. Panic caught the village for a sharp breath. Mercer grabbed at Elias's sleeve, his knuckles white. "Stop the machines," he hissed. "Pull the recordings." People scrambled, and the gramophone's horn shook. Elias pounded his fists on the tape deck and saw the red light go dark. The echo faltered like a struck bell. For a spate of seconds, silence swallowed them all. In that silence, Elias felt the missing fragment inside him warm. It slid back like a return tide. He coughed and tasted dirt, and the world righted itself. He was not the same, but he had not become an absence. He had been grazed, and being grazed left a kind of knowledge in its wake. The villagers pressed round the well and sang, not lullabies, but names, names of the taken, names of the living. The sound did not feed the well now, it knitted people together. The echo could not take a population that would not allow itself to become small. By dawn, Hollow Ridge lay exhausted and watchful. The bell had cracked along one seam, but remained in its place like a broken guardian. The villagers moved with a careful tenderness, checking one another's faces, tightening scarves, replacing missing buttons. Elias packed his recorder and his notes. He had what he'd come for, not a clean story with a perfect ending, but a report that smelled like damp wood and human voices. On the road out, the woman on the porch watched him leave. She put a finger to her lips and then to the sky, and for a moment they both held the same vow, not to sing for nothing, not to give attention to things that ate attention itself. "You can write," she said. "You can tell the world. It might help for a while. But the well is patient, the world forgets. People like forgetting." Elias drove a long while before he allowed himself to read the first lines he'd written. They were awkward and honest, like a letter to a friend who had been lightly burned. He typed with a hand that trembled and steadied when the lines were plain, and he did not hold anything back. He would publish. He would make notes, call colleagues, and submit evidence, audio files, logs of the evening, Mercer's ledger pages. He would put Hollow Ridge into a frame that made sense for readers who preferred to see the world as a string of cause and effect. But some things refused to be framed. Some things leaned toward myth, as if their edges needed a softer geometry to survive. Hollow Ridge would be one of those things. Half investigation, half prayer. He understood that his article would not end the well or permanently quiet the lantern below. At best it might warn people. At best it might remind someone to ring a bell from time to time and to hold their children a little closer. He did not sleep well that night. When dawn crept under his blinds, he fingered the brass whistle Mercer had given him for a momentary laugh, and then slid it into his pocket. Curiosity, he realized, was not a solitary trait. It gathered itself into rituals, bells, records, names. caretaking ways to keep darkness from claiming all that it could. He thought of the child Joel and the woman in the grey dress, of Mercer's worn ledger, and of faces etched with the knowledge that forgetting feeds monsters. The world keeps turning, and sometimes it yanks loose a knot that lets something new in. Elias wrote as if he were setting a trap for memory. He wrote because the act of writing felt, now more than ever, like a bell rung softly against the dark,